enjoyed everything. So we'll quickly wrap up the question answer session. The panel is open for questions. Yeah, please.
Well, John, it was great. You started without a presentation, but you actually ended up doing much better job, I would say. But not that the other speakers were not great; they were fantastic, and I think congratulations for starting the Thai Institute on a very strong footing. And you've done a fantastic job. I think we all enjoyed, and I would say it was a useful session. I have one question, and in fact, my first question is, you mentioned about risk taking, and they mentioned about whether entrepreneurs are crazy or not. Someone else going in another talk, I heard people say entrepreneurs have to have a bipolar disease. They have to be as crazy as they should be. And people gave examples of some of the very well-known and successful entrepreneurs. So I'd like to do you subscribe to the theory that all of us can become entrepreneurs? And what is required? Or do we have to have a bipolar to be successful?
Well, if you're asking me, I disagree. The bipolarness and the craziness, I don't think that at all. In fact, when we're looking to invest in companies and we look at the CEOs, if we don't think they have a balance, one of two things. They either have a balance of the properties that Dave was talking about. They are aggressive and yet thoughtful risk-taking, like I said. If we think they're bipolar or they're crazy or they're messianic or things of that nature, we won't invest. Or if they have that personality and then they have a very sober CFO and a very experienced CM, whatever, and there's a governance structure in the company that keeps that person sort of over there and uses their vision but doesn't allow them to get their hands on the money or their hands on the levers, then that's fine. But I think you said it, Dave, that there are as many entrepreneurial personalities as there are successful companies in the world. But again, the most successful, or the properties of a successful entrepreneur are also the properties of unsuccessful entrepreneurs. And the other thing that I mentioned, I must have done 175 financing presentations in my last couple of companies, and I did a lot to angels, and I've met people who are 100 million, 500 million, $1 billion individuals, and I'll be frank, and this is not being disrespectful to them, but I'll bet I got higher marks than most of them, right? But I'm not worth $1 billion. So it's not about being smart. It's not about being bipolar. It's not about this. It's a good balance of all these things and within the team, and identifying the opportunity. And guess what? A bit of luck. A bit of luck.
Can I address that? In my assessment, I think you've got to have something, an entrepreneurial idea, a concept, or something that you want to bring to the market. And then you also have to have the passion and everything else that I said, obviously. And I just noticed I missed one letter there, actually. In the entrepreneurship, I misspelled it, actually. Okay. There's an N missing there, actually. But I think you got to have an idea, and you got to have the wherewithal to, by the way, bring it to fruition. And by the way, a word that was just said a couple of times, you got to have a bit of luck, and I would say you got to have a lot of luck in spite of doing all those things. Mm-hmm. If God is not on your side, you are not going to be, you will have a good business, but in order for you to be filthy, or if that's the right word, successful, you got to have the blessing from above to by the way, do that.
Well, a different, perhaps less spiritual way of looking at that same thing is that, it's opportunity. Luck is opportunity, preparation meeting opportunity. And so the preparation, everyone does the preparation, but only a subset of people will meet the perfect storm of opportunity to take advantage of it.
But for sure, if you don't do the preparation, you're never going to meet.
Exactly.
If you do the preparation, you might.
In fact, it's mathematically, it's a necessary but not sufficient requirement for you to succeed.
That's right.
Some more questions there.
I have a question for Andy. Andy, you mentioned that whenever you developed a product with customer, it was always successful. And whenever that was not the case, it didn't meet the same fate. would you share with us what are the strategies you employed for getting your first customer, so that we can benefit from that?
Very good question, by the way. First of all, not all my products that I developed in partnership with customers were very successful, but all the products that I developed without customer partners were definitely not successful. Now, item number one. Number two, actually, I'm losing my thoughts here.
How to acquire a
First customer.
Okay, so my strategy again has been single-mindedly, by the way. When I want to develop something, I go to a reputable, credible customer partner, and I in fact tell them that you, sir, you write the price, how much you want to pay me for this product, and it can go from 0 to whatever. But I want to develop this in partnership with you. So my strategy, and again, my experience is all IT based actually, so I believe that if I have a lead customer partner with me, and I have developed a product for him in partnership with him, and if he becomes the user of that product, in fact, my success is in fact quite guaranteed. So I have done that very, very successfully. In fact, I go to the customer saying, I want to develop this for you. First of all, if the customer does not believe that this product is right for him, he's not going to allocate the resources. He's not, even if you give it to him for money. I mean, even if actually, by the way, if the customer tells me, you pay me $100,000, then only I'll buy this product, I'm willing to do that, actually. So my strategy has always been, in the first, pricing is not the issue. By the way, pricing is not at all the issue with my first customer. And that has worked if the customer believes in me and if the partnership has worked.
Thanks.
Yeah, next question.
I'd like to thank you all for touching upon this topic that's, I think, not as, or a bit neglected compared to everything else in entrepreneurship lectures, which is the entrepreneur psychology. I mean, a lot of people will scratch the surface by saying, oh, it's an emotional roller coaster, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot more involved in it that's not so transparent, especially for the first-time entrepreneur, in terms of what did happen behind closed doors. I'm pretty sure in mentoring sessions that gets discussed in a very personal way, but that's not open and visible to the first-time entrepreneur going in. So I wanted to ask why that is the case, even though, I mean, you've touched on, Professor David, on how do we look ourselves in the mirror. The company fails first and foremost because of the entrepreneur himself if he lacks any major qualities, not because of the market, not because of anything else, external factor. It's the internal factor that begins. So why is that the case, and why don't we see a lot more depth into that issue?
Can you articulate your question just in one
So
sentence?
why don't we see more frank and open discussions and visibility and teaching that aspect of entrepreneurship that deals with the day-to-day and the roller coaster?
Good question, by the way. As I told you, every entrepreneur has a lot of stories to share, by the way. Now, some of those stories, some of the entrepreneurs, me included, don't feel quite comfortable, by the way, discussing in a public situation. But if I was sitting one-on-one with certain people that I was mentoring and so on and so forth, a lot of these experiences nuggets actually do come out actually. And by the way, depending upon how comfortable we get with the person that we are talking to, we do share the pitfalls, the failures, the tips, the strategies, what has worked, what has not worked. And also, you also have to realize how much time we have here. So if I only have 10 minutes, and 10 minutes, all I'm going to do actually is I'm going to give you a very huge aerial view of the situation. And secondly, I'm not a professor actually. That's not what I do day in and out actually. David is very articulate when he's lecturing on something. That's not my job. So in fact, I'm trying to compress so much of knowledge in 10, 15 minutes. And what you have to do, by the way, when you're listening there, we don't expect any of you to pick up 100% of what has been said here and apply that. It will be impossible for anybody here, I can tell you, to pick up 100% of what was delivered here. So even if you can pick up one tip, one piece of information, one knowledge, that might get you where you want to go.
I'd also say that there are some places that you can get this kind of information, and that the book that I mentioned, John Nesheim, High Tech Startup, he was, I've forgotten what VenCap he was with in the Valley, but he looked at, I don't know, like 120 deals, and in detail how did they start, back of an envelope, you know, who were the founders, how did they grow, what, you know, it's the other aspect of it, which he articulates, but many other things articulate, is that startups are often like marriages with the rest of your team, literally. And there's the enamored infatuation stage, there's the you know, and ultimately the divorce stage, and there's a funny, heart-wrenching movie about the .com era called Startup. I think it's called Startup. Startup.com. Now it reveals the absurdity of the internet boom, but it also shows, if you forget that, if you just look at the way the personalities develop, and you look at the way the original two founders ended up, actually one of them realizing that the other guy just didn't have the capabilities to manage the business in the right way and had to fire the guy at one point. I mean, look at the that movie Facebook, what's it called, The Social Network. I mean, that's an absurd Hollywood movie as well, but there's some elements of truth there. You know, when the guy was in New York, when the startups were doing work in California, and why wasn't he there, and you know, all kinds of things. So there's a lot of more informal stuff. It's not, you know, I mean, these are distilled excellent patterns, but the reality, startups are messy. You know, they're very, very messy, and they're very real, and they're more like marriages than they are anything else. They're more like marriages than a science experiment.
Part of the problem is it's very idiosyncratic to that particular company because it's complex and it's dealing with small numbers of people and interpersonal relationships, and that every company is unique. So we have a success bias and this idiosyncratic nature of it. The success bias is we like to talk about successes. At a session like this, we invite successful entrepreneurs. How many failed entrepreneurs did we invite tonight? You open up a business magazine. When do they have the failed company on the cover? Tell us everything about why you failed. Our culture doesn't, we're not interested in talking about failures, but you learn more from the failures than from the successes.
Right.
And you see the successful entrepreneurs all have plenty of failures in their background too, because that's what it takes to learn how these things work. So we don't talk about failures in general in the culture, and even if you could, it's a difficult thing at an individual level to talk about. And then even if I told you about all the things that I screwed up in this company, this startup that I worked on, what would you be able to generalize from it? Because that company will be completely unlike yours. So you have to look at lots of those. You know, talk to lots of entrepreneurs, like which things keep you up at night. Seriously, because everybody's had that time when you wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweat, complete panic. Oh my God, how am I going to deal with it? You know, typically, how am I going to make payroll? Right? And how you deal with those things is very idiosyncratic. It depends on the individual and your individual personality. So it gets very messy. And it's a subject that we don't like to talk about anyway. And even if you did, it gets very difficult to pull out from that general principles that a professor can talk about. So we have all these biases against talking about, but I think your question is a brilliant one. We should spend more time on that because there's more to be learned there than by talking about the successes. Because we don't know why you were successful. We just know what you did. But did those things cause success? You know, John said a couple of times, all those things that successful entrepreneurs do are the things that unsuccessful entrepreneurs do too.
David,
But they don't write that in the business press.
David, I have a question for you. Just what your thoughts on this one statement.
Sure.
Entrepreneurship is like an art, and we are trying to apply science to it. Is there any truth to that statement?
I don't know if there's truth to that. I like that. I like that way of framing it. It's not a rigorous mathematical thing. Follow this formula.
Because to be very honest with you, if you ask me to recreate Sigma's story today, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
I don't think any entrepreneur can actually repeat their own success.
And that's part of
What does
that,
that tell us?
maintaining that flexibility and having a certain degree of humility or acceptance that there's luck involved, and I'll have to just change as the world changes, because if you went to do the same company again, the world is not the same as it was, and the recipe for your previous success probably won't work the second time. And we see that sometimes with serial entrepreneurs. I did this company, was very successful. I did this company, it's very successful. I'll do the exact same approach on this company, and it crashes.
And therefore, all the books on entrepreneurship, all the speeches on entrepreneurship, all the sharing of experience on the entrepreneurship is just, what should I say, is you just take it and make it what you want it to be. Use it for you.
Use it for inspiration and more of an art.
I think it's 9:15. My recap session is off the air anyway. I'm pretty happy about that. But just one last question. The participants here, they've enjoyed the debate very well. What is it that they can do to improve their passion, to improve their commitment, to improve the product selection, or getting more ideas, or keeping more open eye or open mind? Is there any action plan which one can suggest to them? Because to me,
Can I suggest to you actually, by the way, what I saw today's session was great as a starting session, and I'm probably speaking on your behalf, and I want some of you guys to correct me if I will. I think these sessions have to be more at the basic level, because these are all starting entrepreneurs, and what we are trying to do, we are trying to talk to them concepts that entrepreneurs have had for many, many years, and actually, by the way, we are at a different stage. So I think some of the sessions, and I don't know your curriculum of the Thai Institute, this thing, but they need some, by the way, in a slow motion, they need some entrepreneurial tips and all that stuff. Am I making sense? Do any of you guys agree with me?
Definitely,
Specific
because,
mechanics.
you know, you have to learn to walk before you can
yeah.
start running. So
I
that's what the
disagree. I think the session was great. I think your stories are inspiring and makes me want to come back again.
I think we underestimate the potential and intellect of people these days. We don't teach them, they learn. But the point here is wonderful, actually, wonderful success stories and wonderful structure. What is it that they can take away today to increase their passion, to increase their commitment, or to increase their imagination or the mind of the entrepreneur? Could it be you started with self-introspection, you started with self-assessment? Should they be self-assessing themselves, looking what areas they're strong in, how they can get the ideas? Where does the belief come from?
Well, I would suggest that David's earlier assessment that says that entrepreneurs come from everywhere, that they aren't risk takers, they aren't quintessential risk takers, they aren't this, they aren't that, they come from everywhere. So I think a self-assessment is not really valid, because we've just learned that everyone is a potential entrepreneur. I think what you need to do, and even entrepreneurs, like I can sit there, I remember I had some friends at Queen's in engineering physics. They lived together, and they every meal that they had together, they would have a scratch pad and they would write down ideas that consumer electronics would be good for. And they did that for like 2 or 3 years. And they came up with hundreds of ideas, and only a small fraction of them looked like good business ideas. So they were trying to be very, very deliberate. So I would suggest, and I personally found this a great session from my perspective, from looking back on my experiences, but I also found it a bit of a downer, because we were talking about how damn difficult it is, and how you're mortgaging your house, and you're gonna, I mean, honestly, like, it's a real downer. So I think what's gonna happen is that some people here are gonna say, holy crap, I better go work for a big insurance company. And others are gonna say, I wasn't even listening, I was thinking about my product. I think if I change it this way, it'll be really better. They weren't even listening to us. And then, which is not a bad thing. And then there are some people who are saying, I knew all that stuff, and I've seen people come through it and really think it's cool, and I've got some good frameworks now, so now I want to take my idea and optimize it based on what I'm seeing. I know that's not going to be perfect, but I know that I'm going to be better if I do that. So I think that's the kind of assessment that I would do if I was coming out of this.
John, the one thing though, on the same point, I mean, I have been an entrepreneur for I don't know how many years now, since early 90s. All throughout my life, by the way, in spite of these successes, the story has been blow hard, blow cold. Ups and downs, full of ups and downs, even last month, last year, last decade. So if somebody cannot handle ups and downs, if somebody cannot handle uncertainties, then they should really assess themselves. So from that point of view,
I totally agree.
Okay.
It doesn't matter, by the way, whether you have any other skills or not. I mean, if you have, but the main thing is, do you have the wherewithal? Can you handle ups and downs? Can you handle failures? Because there will be many more failures than successes, by the way, that's for sure. However, the bottom line is, we are here, we are talking very confidently about our successes. So obviously, I also told you that entrepreneurship is the best career anybody can opt for, provided you're willing to work hard.
On that note, may I request the Thai chair to have word of thanks and appreciation of the speakers?